My name is Stephen Knight. This is part 2 in the series of creating custom lists in SharePoint. We've previously created, using custom lists, we've created a site column that we're going to put to use in this next exercise. Now, this technical process we're following is suitable for SharePoint 2010, SharePoint Online or Office 365, SharePoint Foundation, Standard or Enterprise. So any of the standard flavours of SharePoint 2010, this will work. For those of you with SharePoint 2007, Foundations or the server product, this will work there as well. It's just you're going to click on a few different things as we go through, but the same basic process is indeed possible. So we're going to create a custom list. This is a sales register. Now I've chosen a sales register basically because I wanted to explore certain types of columns. This technique could be used for any sort of a register that you're currently keeping in Excel and you want to move to SharePoint. Alright, let's make a start. So where we're heading is up to Site Actions, and in Site Actions I'm going to More Options, and I should get my nice little graphical interactive menu, just taking a moment to load. In the work environment, if you're not getting this, if you're just getting the plain text menu, this is actually driven by Silverlight, so you just need to have a chat to your help desk about getting Microsoft Silverlight installed. So what we're going to do here now on the left hand side, I'm just going to click List to see my available lists, and I'm going to choose Custom List, and I'm going to go into Custom List, and I now want to create a sales register. So this is my sales register for Team 1, and I'm going to click More Options, and this is a register of sales. Register of sales, and yes, I do want this on the quick launch, but not necessarily right away. While it's a work in progress, we might not want it, we might not want it on the quick launch, so we'd rather say no, and then when it's ready we can put it on the quick launch for people to find. Let's go create, and there's our starting point. Now our next step, using the ribbon here, is I'm heading across to the right to list settings, and what we want to do here is work with the list settings. Now the title here, I'm going to leave the title, we will rename that field a little bit later on. It's just a standard default field that you get. If I click title, there it is. You'll notice there isn't a delete here, so I could rename this a little later on, and that's what we'll do. So I'm just going to leave that there. So on my carefully produced plan, I want to start with a transaction date for the sale. So I'm going to use here create column, and I'm going to type in here transaction date. This is going to store date and time. You'll notice the screen just refreshes there while we're doing that. If I scroll down a little bit, this is in the description. This is the date of sale. And yes, we do want this to be required. It's kind of going to be necessary. So we do want it to be required. I want it to default to today's date. It'll use your standard SharePoint regional settings for how to display the date, but we want that to display today's date. We're not really too worried up here about date and time. Now, it may be of use to you to know what time of day the sale actually occurred, so that ultimately you could count how many sales occur within certain hours of the day. Excel can definitely help you with that, so you could export the data later and analyse it. But for our little shop, I just need to know the date the sale occurred. But you could get date and time if that was going to be useful. Yes, I do want this in the default view, the last setting here, and let's go OK. So we've now got transaction date there. Moving right along, let's add our next column. So create column, and in my plan it says we want salesperson, and just trying to be clever there and copy and paste my column names from my plan. So I'm going to type in sales person, and salesperson is going to be based on the personal group. Now what I'm assuming here is that all our salespeople are in the system. Okay, they've got user IDs and accounts, so they would be logged in as themselves entering the sales. So we'll put salesperson in there, and this is the staff member making the sale. Now, yes, this is required. We need to know who made the sale because we want to do analysis with that later on. Now, do we want to allow multiple selections? Now, in this particular case, I'm going to say no. But you could, if you had a situation where multiple salespeople contributed to a sale. Okay. In fact, as a practical example of this, I've just bought a replacement computer, and the main salesperson I was working with was really, really helpful, but deferred a couple of questions to a colleague that answered a couple of technical questions for us, and so you would want to give both salespeople credit for that. So we're going to allow selection of people only rather than people in groups. We're going to use all users in this case, but if I had a group that was a salesperson group, I could say, look, you've got to pick people from this group. It would make it a bit tidier, a bit easier for people. So you could select from a SharePoint group, and we'll show the name of the salesperson. You've got some options here if you wanted to show their name with a picture. Okay, my system, my data's not that extensive. I don't have pictures for my sales staff. I then go OK. So we've now got a column for selecting a salesperson like you would select an internal addressee from your global address book. So that way we're also getting the right names. They're not just putting Fred and then we've got 3 Freds, which Fred made the sale. Now for our next little exercise, we're going to choose a site column because we want to show some data, some drop-down lists or checkboxes from our site columns. So I've chosen site columns. To speed things up, I made a group in the previous exercise called Dodgy Sales, which is where all the columns go for Dodgy Sales Proprietary Limited. And you might recall in the previous exercise, I made a site column called Product Category. Now what I did after that was made another site column called Payment Method. And we do want to know the payment method. That's going to give us an ability to choose, do we want Visa, MasterCard, or credit card, debit card, what payment method was actually used. So we've got that selected as well. Because they're site columns, those 2 columns can be easily reused across multiple lists. So we've now got product category and payment method. Now if I click product category, I can make some additional choices here if I needed to. So I could say yes, that is a required column, but I could change my mind and say no, it's not. And I could also choose to allow multiple values. Now I'm in this case going to say, look, don't allow multiple values. Okay, we just want things to belong to one product category in this particular situation. Let's go OK. And for payment method, now I'm just going to tweak the description here. So that description has come from the global site column. So I'm going to say primary payment method used in this sale. We could allow multiple values. So if we let people pay mostly by credit card but also put down a cash deposit, we could say allow multiple values and you could tick all that apply. Initially, let's say, look, we just want the primary payment method. So what was the main one used? Let's go OK. So now we see here our site columns, payment category, payment method, one of which is required, one of which is not. Again, you can change that later on if necessary. Right, we now want to know the order quantity. So let's go to site column, create column, my apologies, create column, and now my copy and paste works. Okay. Now order quantity, I'm going to choose numbers. So this is the number of units ordered. And now in the real world, I would make this a required column. However, we are going to copy and paste using some existing data in a spreadsheet. Not all of this information is complete, so I'm going to say no initially, bring all the data in, and then we will copy and paste. Then we will set certain columns to be required once we've brought our data in that might not be 100% complete. If we try to bring in data that's not 100% complete with the required setting on, we're going to get some issues because it'll be requiring data that we don't yet have. So I'm going to leave that off, but if we were starting from scratch, I'd say yes to that right from the start. Number of decimal places is 0. Now, order quantities, I'm going to say minimum of 1, maximum of 1,000, but again, you can adapt that to suit your own situation. So if you were dealing with weights as your number of units and people could order so many kilos or 1.5 kilos or 1.5 pounds, then we would allow decimal places, but not in this particular instance. Let's go OK. Rightio. A little later on we'll change the order of these to suit as well. So we now need a unit price. So we are going to create a new column that is our unit price. This is going to be currency. This is going to be the price per unit. Same logic as before. Yes, I would make it required, but some of our incoming data is not complete, so we will allow for that. 2 decimal places. Now with our minimum and maximum price, now you'll know your own products as to what's a minimum, what's a maximum price. I'm going to say look, at least $1, and our most expensive unit in the store is $9,999, so just shy of 10,000. There won't be a default value because if you use a default value in this case, it could cause some issues. Now with the currency format, you've got a wide range of currency formats. I'm going to stick with the Aussie dollar. What you should be seeing here is the default currency format being selected that is based on your regional settings in SharePoint. So if you're getting the US dollar and you're in Australia, it means that when your SharePoint's been installed, they haven't set the regional settings correctly. Have a chat to your SharePoint admins. It's also something you can change locally, so you can fine-tune that if it's not right. It can be fixed. Okay. Next column, according to my plan, is I want to get order value. Now this is going to be our first calculated column. So, getting order value here. And now paste doesn't work. Okay. I think the little lesson I've learnt from that is not to go into the actual column settings before I copy and paste. Now this is going to be calculated. And in the description, this is quantity times unit price. So in our formula, I've got order quantity here, which has to be numerical of some sort. I'm going to add that into the formula. Now, if you've ever done a formula in Excel, you'll know the next bit here, asterisk for multiply, and unit price. So quantity by unit price. Now, if you're doing more sophisticated calculations, remember, as with Excel, the rules of BOMDAS, that is brackets, exponentiation, multiplication, division, addition and subtraction, our sequence in which calculations are processed, applies as much here as it does in Excel. So if you're doing division or other calculations here, tax calculations for example, make sure if you need brackets that you use them here so you get the right answers. If you'd use brackets in Excel, use them here. Now, what do we want? We want the answer as currency. We'd like it to 2 decimal places, and we'll get it in the Aussie dollar. Let's go OK. Rightio. Now, at this point, folks, I've said let's go about 97 times. If it's driving you nuts, I will try and stop. Now, next thing I want to repurpose the title just for a short column for keeping track of special requirements. So I'm going to go back into title, which I promised you earlier we would rename, and I'm going to put in here special requirements. And this is any special information, e.g. when to deliver or beware of dog. Okay, so we're giving people some suggestions as to what could go in here. This is not going to be required because some orders are not going to have special requirements. They'll be fine. You don't want to force people to write some gibberish in here that people have then got to read. Okay, again, ultimately we'll stick this down the bottom. Now, my last column I'm going to add is a delivery status. Now, what I'd like you to imagine is in our little company here, we deliver. Okay, we deliver. Again, now my paste works. Okay, I've only been using computers for about 1 million years and I can't manage copy and paste. Alright, so what we're going to do here is this is going to be a choice. So we're assuming that in our little company we have 3 states. It's sold, it's been picked, that is it's been gotten out of the warehouse, and it's been delivered. Okay, that's our 3 states. A little later on, this will be used in a workflow. So stage of order delivery. Delivery with an E and an I. Okay, again, I will ultimately say yes, this will be required, but not until we've actually imported all the data. Now, we need 3 states here. So this is going to be used with a 3-stage workflow. So I'm going to say sold, picked, and delivered. Okay, so we've sold the thing, we've picked it from the warehouse, and we've delivered it from the customer. And I'm going to give this radio buttons. So your drop-down list would be fine for this, but I'm going to give it radio buttons. I wouldn't give it checkboxes. Checkboxes allow multiple selections. We want people to pick a state. And I'm going to say the default state of a new order will be sold. Then if we go OK, we've now got our basic set of columns that we need, including a calculation, including a choice for. After a brief word from our sponsor, we'll be back to look at rearranging the view in the data entry form and to look at importing our data from an Excel spreadsheet into our newly created custom list. more soon. Now we're going to have a look at reordering the columns in the actual data entry form itself. Now let's have a look at what we've got to start off with, and then we'll reorder it. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to use the breadcrumbs up the top here to view the list. Nothing in there yet. When I click Add New Item, we have the items in our list roughly in the order that we added them in, with a little one that I snuck in during the break where I consulted my plan and realised we needed a product description. So we've got our various fields here. We'll run through using these and how the different controls work. But for now, let's bail out of there. Let's cancel from there. And let's go back to the List tab. And we'll head back into List Settings. And scrolling down, we've got Column Ordering. Now the idea here is you want your columns to reflect in the sequence that they're in, to reflect any paper data entry forms that people will have. It's much easier to enter data if the on-screen form matches the paper input, if there is a paper input. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say, look, let's put special requirements down at number 10. So that's our last thing that we'll ask about. The transaction date and the salesperson, we'll get that in fairly quickly. The product category you'll notice is number 3. So I want product description to be number 4. So we'll choose the category and then payment method. Now what we might want to do here is we might want to get the unit price to come in before the order quantity. Now what I particularly like about this is it reorganises it instantaneously. You'll notice when we go to change the order in views later on, it's not as instantaneous, although the basic approach is the same. So we're happy with all of that. The sequence that reflects our paper forms that we're working with. So let's go OK. Next, we're going to import some data from a spreadsheet. Now first up, I'm going to click on my breadcrumbs to go back to my list. I'm going to go to the List tab. I want to go to the Datasheet view. Now I want to order the columns in a sequence that makes sense, that matches up with the spreadsheet. Now it's very easy to move the columns around in the Datasheet view. Let me take, for example, order value here. Is I can drag that across, so you can reorder these. If your spreadsheet, maybe you're getting data from an existing spreadsheet, the columns are in a particular order, it's very easy to move these around to down there. Oop. I can, by right-clicking, bring up a shortcut menu and choose to hide a column. Now, this little tip before we hide this, make sure your hidden columns are all off to the far right if you are hiding any columns, because if they're within the other columns, they're actually there in the sequence and it'll muck up your copy and paste. So we'll just temporarily hide that, which is very, very handy. I'm going to scroll back over to the left here, and I'm going to go and get my data from my Excel spreadsheet. And so what I'm going to do here is select the data. Now just a little trick that I'm going to use here is clicking in the bottom left hand corner. That's the furthest piece of information I've got there. And then I'm going to shift click just under transaction date. Now the reason I'm doing this is we don't need the headings, although the sequence is important. Also the data type is important. If someone's written not known in one of the transaction date cells, then that's going to cause a bit of a problem when we go across into SharePoint that's expecting a date. So you may need to tidy your data up just to make sure that you've got the right data types there. So I'm just going to copy that. So I've got 96 odd rows of data there, and we'll minimize. and I'm clicking here on transaction date, which is my first actual cell. Now a single click here, not a double click. You'll notice if I double click I get the cursor in there, that's going to cause you problems. So I'm just going to bail out there. So we just need, I just pressed escape just to move out of edit mode. If I now go paste, I just went Control V there. It's pasted the data in there, and I can scroll out to the right, and that's all good. And if I just click, I've now got all of those records have come in. Now, if I go back up to the border here between payment method and the end of the list, if I double click, you'll notice it's revealed the order value for me. So I can see it's calculated that, which is really, really nice. And my last step there is I'm going to go back to the standard view. So we've now imported our data. We have some missing values here, which we'll look at our views later on as to how we maintain that. You may recall I said earlier on there were some columns that I wouldn't make required until we actually imported the data, and then we could do our housekeeping and bring that data up to date. So that's all good. We've got our different payment methods and things showing there. So what I'm going to do now, we've imported the data, we're happy with that. I'm going to go back to my list settings and just revisit a couple of these columns that I didn't initially make required, so that any new records will be required. So I'm going to say, look, the payment method, that is going to be required, and we'll go OK there. So we'll make that required, and what we're also going to do is we'll go to the unit price, and that's going to be required because pretty obviously we need that, and the order quantity is going to be required. Now with my order quantity I'm going to set a default of 1. Now the idea being that your typical order will be for 1, so we'll set that as the default, and let's go OK. Now if we were to register a sale, so we've looked at importing the data, now we want to just add a new item here, so I'm just clicking the items tab, and now with the new item button, top part of the button does the default action, bottom part of the button, if you click on it, gives you choices. In this case either one will take you to new item. So we have our default date being today's date. We have the date picker that we can use to select maybe that order we actually took that on Saturday. With the salesperson here, we will choose a salesperson. Now I can either type in the name and then do a Control K, which is to check names, or click, and if it finds the correct name, underline it, or I could click the check names button. Now alternatively, if I wasn't sure of somebody's name, I can click the browse button, and now I'm in SharePoint Online, and if I type Dan and have a look for Dan, give it a moment, what we should see, there he is there, and we can pick that person and choose OK. So we've just rung up a sale there to Dan Matthews, and this might be a television, and we're going to say it's a 32 centimetre XYZ brand TV, LED TV, and we're getting paid for this by credit card. The unit price is $3.99 as our special Dodgy Brothers price, and our order quantity is Dan's ordered 2 of those, and at the moment that's just sold. We'll get to picked and delivered a bit later on, and the special requirements must be delivered by Okay, and probably of the 4,000 odd people that'll end up seeing this video, one of you will have gotten the highway connection there. Anyway, let's so we've got a note there, some special requirements, not required of course, and let's save that. Rightio. So we now have, if we flick through our data, now we've got to deal with the views here because this view is obviously very, very awkward. But there it is there. Actually, no, that's not even that there because we've still got more. Here it is here, our record for Dan Matthews for a sale of a television by Dan. Now, in the next exercise, we'll look at building up some views so we can more easily move around and see all of Dan's sales or all of my sales or all of Susan Hilton's sales. So for the moment, what we've done there, just to summarise, is we've created a custom list. We have imported some data using the datasheet view. We've modified the standard SharePoint data entry form to get the record, the columns or the fields, into a sequence that matches our input form that's more convenient for doing input. So I'm hoping you found that useful. Again, please send any questions to stephen@trainascope.com. More than happy to answer your questions, or you can feedback through YouTube and other methods as well. So thank you for your attention. Thank you also for your patience with my problems with the copying and pasting earlier in this tutorial.